Chapter-1 of Roads of Destiny, Part 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Scott Foster. Roads of Destiny by O.Henry. Chapter-1, Part 2. The Right Branch. 3 leagues then the road ran and turned into a puzzle. It joined with another and a larger road at right angles. David stood uncertain for a while, and then took the road to the right. Whither it led he knew not, but he was resolved to leave Verneuil far behind that night. He traveled a league and then passed a large chateau which showed testimony of recent entertainment. Lights shone from every window. From the great stone gateway ran a tracery of wheel tracks drawn in the dust by the vehicles of the guests. 3 leagues farther, and David was weary. He rested and slept for a while on a bed of pine boughs at the roadside, then up and on again along the unknown way. Thus for 5 days he traveled the great road, sleeping upon nature's balsamic beds or in peasants' ricks, eating of their black hospitable bread, drinking from streams or the willing cup of the goatherd. At length he crossed a great bridge and set his foot within the smiling city that has crushed or crowned more poets than all the rest of the world. His breath came quickly as Paris sang to him in a little undertone her vital chant of greeting, the hum of voice and foot and wheel. High up under the eaves of an old house in the Rue Conti, David paid for lodging and set himself in a wooden chair to his poems. The street, once sheltering citizens of import and consequence, was now given over to those who ever follow in the wake of decline. The houses were tall and still possessed of a ruined dignity, but many of them were empty, save for dust and the spider. By night there was the clash of steel and the cries of brawlers straying restlessly from inn to inn. Where once gentility abode was now but a rancid and rude incontinence. But here David found housing commensurate to his scant purse. Daylight and candlelight found him at pen and paper. One afternoon he was returning from a foraging trip to the lower world with bread and curds and a bottle of thin wine. Halfway up his dark stairway he met, or rather came upon, for she rested on the stair, a young woman of beauty that should balk even the justice of a poet's imagination. A loose dark cloak, flung open, showed a rich gown beneath. Her eyes changed swiftly with every little shade of thought. Within one moment they would be round and artless like a child's, and long and cozening like a gypsy's. One hand raised her gown, undraping a little shoe, high-heeled, with its ribbons dangling untied. So heavenly she was, so unfitted to stoop, so qualified to charm and command. Perhaps she had seen David coming, and had waited for his help there. Ah, would Monsieur pardon that she occupied the stairway, but the shoe, the naughty shoe. Alas, it would not remain tied. Ah, if Monsieur would be so gracious. The poet's fingers trembled as he tied the contrary ribbons. Then he would have fled from the danger of her presence, but the eyes grew long and cozening like a gypsy's and held him. He leaned against the balustrade, clutching his bottle of sour wine. "You have been so good," she said, smiling. "Does Monsieur perhaps live in the house?" "Yes, madame, I think so, madame." "Perhaps in the 3rd story, then?" "No, madame, higher up." The lady fluttered her fingers with the least possible gesture of impatience. "Pardon, certainly I am not discreet in asking. Monsieur will forgive me. It is surely not becoming that I should inquire where he lodges." "Oh, madame, do not say so. I live in the—" No, do not tell me. Now I see that I erred. But I cannot lose the interest I feel in this house and all that is in it. Once it was my home. Often I come here but to dream of those happy days again. Will you let that be my excuse?" "Well, let me tell you, then, for you need no excuse," stammered the poet. "I live in the top floor, the small room where the stairs turn." "In the front room?" asked the lady, turning her head sideways. "The rear, madame." The lady sighed, as if with relief. "I will detain you no longer then, monsieur," she said, employing the round and artless eye. "Take good care of my house. Alas, only the memories of it are mine now. Adieu, and accept my thanks for your courtesy." She was gone, leaving but a smile and a trace of sweet perfume. David climbed the stairs as one in slumber, but he awoke from it, and the smile and the perfume lingered with him, and never afterward did either seem quite to leave him. This lady, of whom he knew nothing, drove him to lyrics of eyes, chansons of swiftly conceived love, odes to curling hair, and sonnets to slippers on slender feet. Poet he must have been, for Yvonne was forgotten. This fine new loveliness held him with its freshness and grace. The subtle perfume about her filled him with strange emotions. On a certain night, 3 persons were gathered about a table in a room on the 3rd floor of the same house. 3 chairs and the table and a lighted candle upon it was all the furniture. One of the persons was a huge man, dressed in black. His expression was one of sneering pride. The ends of his upturned mustache reached nearly to his mocking eyes. Another was a lady, young and beautiful, with eyes that could be round and artless as a child's, or long and cozening like a gypsy's, but were now keen and ambitious like any other conspirators. The third was a man of action, a combatant, a bold and impatient executive, breathing fire and steel. He was addressed by the others as Captain Desrolles. This man struck the table with his fist and said with controlled violence, Tonight, as he goes to midnight mass, I am tired of the plotting that gets nowhere. I am sick of signals and ciphers and secret meetings and such baragouin. Let us be honest, traitors. If France is to be rid of him, let us kill in the open and not hunt with snares and traps. Tonight, I say, I back my words, my hand will do the deed. Tonight, as he goes to mass. The lady turned upon him a cordial look. Woman, however wedded to plots, must ever thus bow to rash courage. The big man stroked his upturned mustache. Dear Captain, he said in a great voice, softened by habit, this time I agree with you. Nothing is to be gained by waiting. Enough of the palace guards belong to us to make the endeavor a safe one. Tonight, repeated Captain Desrolles, again striking the table. You have heard me, Marquis. My hand will do the deed. But now, said the huge man softly, comes a question. Word must be sent to our partisans in the palace, and a signal agreed upon. Our stanchest men must accompany the royal carriage. At this hour, what messenger can penetrate so far as the south doorway? Ribouet is stationed there. Once a message is placed in his hands, all will go well. I will send the message, said the lady. You, Countess? Said the Marquis, raising his eyebrows. Your devotion is great, we know, but— Listen, exclaimed the lady, rising and resting her hands upon the table. In a garret of this house lives a youth from the provinces as guileless and tender as the lambs he tended there. I have met him twice or thrice upon the stairs. I questioned him, fearing that he might dwell too near the room in which we were accustomed to meet. He is mine, if I will. He writes poems in his garret, and I think he dreams of me. He will do what I say. He shall take the message to the palace. The Marquis rose from his chair and bowed. You did not permit me to finish my sentence, Countess, he said. I would have said, your devotion is great, but your wit and charm are infinitely greater. While the conspirators were thus engaged, David was polishing some lines addressed to his amourette d'escalier. He heard a timorous knock at his door and opened it, with a great throb, to behold her there, panting as one in straits, with eyes wide open and artless, like a child's. Monsieur, she breathed, I come to you in distress. I believe you to be good and true, and I know of no other help. How I flew through the streets among the swaggering men. Monsieur, my mother is dying. My uncle is a captain of guards in the palace of the king. Someone must fly to bring him. May I hope— Mademoiselle, interrupted David, his eyes shining with the desire to do her service. Your hopes shall be my wings. Tell me how I may reach him. The lady thrust a sealed paper into his hand. Go to the south gate, mind, and say to the guards there, the falcon has left his nest. They will pass you, and you will go to the south entrance to the palace. Repeat the words, and give this letter to the man who will reply, let him strike when he will. This is the password, monsieur, entrusted to me by my uncle, for now, when the country is disturbed and men plot against the king's life, no one without it can gain entrance to the palace grounds after nightfall. If you will, monsieur, take him this letter so that my mother may see him before she closes her eyes. Give it to me, said David eagerly. But shall I let you return home through the streets alone so late? No, fly. Each moment is like a precious jewel. Sometime, said the lady with eyes long and cozening like a gypsy's, I will try to thank you for your goodness. The poet thrust the letter into his breast and bounded down the stairway. The lady, when he was gone, returned to the room below. The eloquent eyebrows of the Marquis interrogated her. He is gone, she said, as fleet and stupid as one of his own sheep to deliver it. The table shook again from the batter of Captain Desrolles' fist. Sacred name, he cried, I have left my pistols behind. I can trust no others. "Take this," said the Marquis, drawing from beneath his cloak a shining great weapon ornamented with carven silver. "There are none truer, but guard it closely, for it bears my arms and crest, and already I am suspected. Me, I must put many leagues between myself and Paris this night. Tomorrow must find me in my chateau. After you, dear Countess." The Marquis puffed out the candle. The lady, well cloaked, and the two gentlemen softly descended the stairway and flowed into the crowd that roamed along the narrow pavements of the Rue Conti. David sped. At the south gate of the king's residence a halberd was laid to his breast, but he turned its point with the words, "The falcon has left his nest." "Pass, brother," said the guard, "and go quickly." On the south steps of the palace they moved to seize him, but again the mot de passe charmed the watchers. One among them stepped forward and began, "Let him strike," but a flurry among the guards told of a surprise. A man of keen look and soldierly stride suddenly pressed through them and seized the letter which David held in his hand. "Come with me," he said, and led him inside the great hall. Then he tore open the letter and read it. He beckoned to a man uniformed as an officer of musketeers who was passing. "Captain Tetreau, you will have the guards at the south entrance and the south gate arrested and confined. Place men known to be loyal in their places." To David he said, "Come with me." He conducted him through a corridor and an anteroom into a spacious chamber, where a melancholy man, somberly dressed, sat brooding in a great leather-covered chair. To that man he said, "Sire, I have told you that the palace is as full of traitors and spies as a sewer is of rats. You have thought, sire, that it was my fancy. This man penetrated to your very door by their connivance. He bore a letter which I have intercepted. I have brought him here that your majesty may no longer think my zeal excessive." "I will question him," said the king, stirring in his chair. He looked at David with heavy eyes dulled by an opaque film. The poet bent his knee. "From where do you come?" asked the king. "From the village of Verneuil, in the province of Eure-et-Loir, sire." "What do you follow in Paris?" I would be a poet, sire." "What did you in Verneuil?" "I minded my father's flock of sheep." The king stirred again, and the film lifted from his eyes. "Ah, in the fields." "Yes, sire." "You lived in the fields. You went out in the cool of the morning and lay among the hedges in the grass. The flock distributed itself upon the hillside. You drank of the living stream. You ate your sweet brown bread in the shade, and you listened, doubtless, to blackbirds piping in the grove. Is not that so, shepherd?" "It is, sire," answered David with a sigh, "and to the bees at the flowers, and maybe to the grape-gatherers singing on the hill." "Yes, yes," said the king impatiently, "maybe to them, but surely to the blackbirds. They whistled often in the grove, did they not?" "Nowhere, sire, so sweetly as in Eure-et-Loir. I have endeavored to express their song in some verses that I have written." "Can you repeat those verses?" asked the king eagerly. "A long time ago I listened to the blackbirds. It would be something better than a kingdom if one could rightly construe their song. And at night you drove the sheep to the fold and then sat in peace and tranquility to your pleasant bread. Can you repeat those verses, shepherd?" "They run this way, sire," said David with respectful ardor. "Lazy shepherd, see your lambkins. Skip ecstatic on the mead. See the firs dance in their breezes. Hear Pan blowing at his reed. Hear us calling from the treetops. See us swoop upon your flock. Yield us wool to make our nests warm. In the branches of the—" "If it pleases your majesty," interrupted a harsh voice, "I will ask a question or two of this rhymester. There is little time to spare. I crave pardon, sire, if my anxiety for your safety offends." "The loyalty," said the king, "of the Duc d'Aumale is too well proven to give offense." He sank into his chair, and the film came again over his eyes. "First," said the duke, "I will read you the letter he brought. Tonight is the anniversary of the Dauphin's death. If he goes, as is his custom, to midnight mass to pray for the soul of his son, the falcon will strike at the corner of the Rue Esplanade. If this be his intention, set a red light in the upper room at the southwest corner of the palace, that the falcon may take heed." "Peasant," said the duke sternly, "you have heard these words. Who gave you this message to bring?" "My lord duke," said David sincerely, "I will tell you. A lady gave it to me. She said her mother was ill, and that this writing would fetch her uncle to her bedside. I do not know the meaning of the letter, but I will swear that she is beautiful and good." "Describe the woman," commanded the Duke, "and how you came to be her dupe." "Describe her," said David with a tender smile. "You would command words to perform miracles. Well, she is made of sunshine and deep shade. She is slender like the alders and moves with their grace. Her eyes change while you gaze into them, now round and then half shut as the sun peeps between two clouds. When she comes, heaven is all about her. When she leaves, there is chaos and a scent of hawthorn blossoms. She came to see me in the Rue Conti, number 29. "It is the house," said the Duke, turning to the king, "that we have been watching. Thanks to the poet's tongue, we have a picture of the infamous Countess Quebedo." "Sire and my Lord Duke," said David earnestly, "I hope my poor words have done no injustice. I have looked into that lady's eyes. I will stake my life that she is an angel, letter or no letter." The Duke looked at him steadily. "I will put you to the proof," he said slowly. "Dressed as the king, you shall yourself attend mass in his carriage at midnight. Do you accept the test?" David smiled. "I have looked into her eyes," he said. "I had my proof there. Take yours how you will." Half an hour before 12, the Duc d'Aumale with his own hands set a red lamp in a southwest window of the palace. At 10 minutes to the hour, David, leaning on his arm, dressed as the king from top to toe, with his head bowed in his cloak, walked slowly from the royal apartments to the waiting carriage. The Duke assisted him inside and closed the door. The carriage whirled away along its route to the cathedral. On the qui-vive in a house at the corner of the Rue Esplanade was Captain Tetreault with 20 men ready to pounce upon the conspirators when they should appear. But it seemed that, for some reason, the plotters had slightly altered their plans. When the royal carriage had reached the Rue Christopher, one square nearer than the Rue Esplanade, forth from it burst Captain Desrolles with his band of would-be regicides and assailed the equipage. The guards upon the carriage, though surprised at the premature attack, descended and fought valiantly. The noise of conflict attracted the force of Captain Tetreault, and they came pelting down the street to the rescue. But in the meantime, the desperate Desrolles had torn open the door of the king's carriage, thrust his weapon against the body of the dark figure inside, and fired. Now, with loyal reinforcements at hand, the street rang with cries and the rasp of steel, but the frightened horses had dashed away. Upon the cushions lay the dead body of the poor mock king and poet, slain by a ball from the pistol of Monseigneur the Marquis de Beaupertuis. The main road. 3 leagues, then, the road ran and turned into a puzzle. It joined with another and a larger road at right angles. David stood uncertain for a while, and then sat himself to rest upon its side. Whither these roads led he knew not. Either way there seemed to lie a great world full of chance and peril. And then, sitting there, his eye fell upon a bright star, one that he and Yvonne had named for theirs. That set him thinking of Yvonne, and he wondered if he had not been too hasty. Why should he leave her and his home because a few hot words had come between them? Was love so brittle a thing that jealousy, the very proof of it, could break it? Mornings always brought a cure for the little heartaches of evening. There was yet time for him to return home without anyone in the sweetly sleeping village of Verneuil being the wiser. His heart was Yvonne's. There, where he had lived always, he could write his poems and find his happiness. David rose and shook off his unrest and the wild mood that had tempted him. He set his face steadfastly back along the road he had come. By the time he had retraveled the road to Verneuil, his desire to rove was gone. He passed the sheepfold, and the sheep scurried, with a drumming flutter, at his late footsteps, warming his heart by the homely sound. He crept without noise into his little room and lay there, thankful that his feet had escaped the distress of new roads that night. How well he knew woman's heart. The next evening Yvonne was at the well in the road where the young congregated in order that the curé might have business. The corner of her eye was engaged in a search for David, albeit her set mouth seemed unrelenting. He saw the look, braved the mouth, drew from it a recantation and, later, a kiss as they walked homeward together. 3 months afterwards they were married. David's father was shrewd and prosperous. He gave them a wedding that was heard of 3 leagues away. Both the young people were favorites in the village. There was a procession in the streets, a dance on the green. They had the marionettes and a tumbler out from Dreux to delight the guests. Then a year, and David's father died. The sheep and the cottage descended to him. He already had the seemliest wife in the village. Yvonne's milk pails and her brass kettles were bright. Oof, they blinded you in the sun when you passed that way. But you must keep your eyes upon her yard, for her flower beds were so neat and gay they restored to you your sight. And you might hear her sing, aye, as far as the double chestnut tree above Père Gruneau's blacksmith forge. But a day came when David drew out paper from a long-shut drawer and began to bite the end of a pencil. Spring had come again and touched his heart. Poet he must have been, for now Yvonne was well nigh forgotten. This fine new loveliness of earth held him with its witchery and grace. The perfume from her woods and meadows stirred him strangely. Daily he had gone forth with his flock and brought it safe at night. But now he stretched himself under the hedge and pieced words together on his bits of paper. The sheep strayed, and the wolves, perceiving that difficult poems make easy mutton, ventured from the woods and stole his lambs. David's stock of poems grew larger, and his flock smaller. Yvonne's nose and temper waxed sharp and her talk blunt. Her pans and kettles grew dull, but her eyes had caught their flash. She pointed out to the poet that his neglect was reducing the flock and bringing woe upon the household. David hired a boy to guard the sheep, locked himself in the little room at the top of the cottage, and wrote more poems. The boy, being a poet by nature but not furnished with an outlet in the way of writing, spent his time in slumber. The wolves lost no time in discovering that poetry and sleep are practically the same, so the flock steadily grew smaller. Yvonne's ill temper increased at an equal rate. Sometimes she would stand in the yard and rail at David through his high window. Then you could hear her as far as the double chestnut tree above Père Gruneau's blacksmith forge. Monsieur Papineau, the kind, wise, meddling old notary, saw this, as he saw everything at which his nose pointed. He went to David, fortified himself with a great pinch of snuff, and said, "Friend Mignot, I affixed the seal upon the marriage certificate of your father. It would distress me to be obliged to attest a paper signifying the bankruptcy of his son, but that is what you are coming to. I speak as an old friend. Now, listen to what I have to say. You have your heart set, I perceive, upon poetry. At Dreux I have a friend, one Monsieur Bril, Georges Bril. He lives in a little cleared space in a house full of books. He is a learned man. He visits Paris each year. He himself has written books. He will tell you when the catacombs were made, how they found out the names of the stars, and why the plover has a long bill. The meaning and the form of poetry is to him as intelligent as the baa of sheep is to you. I will give you a letter to him, and you shall take him your poems and let him read them. Then you will know if you shall write more or give your attention to your wife and business." "Write the letter," said David. "I am sorry you did not speak of this sooner." At sunrise the next morning he was on the road to Dreux with the precious roll of poems under his arm. At noon he wiped the dust from his feet at the door of Monsieur Bril. That learned man broke the seal of Monsieur Papineau's letter and sucked up its contents through his gleaming spectacles as the sun draws water. He took David inside to his study and sat him down upon a little island beat upon by a sea of books. Monsieur Bril had a conscience. He flinched not even at a mass of manuscript the thickness of a finger length and rolled to an incorrigible curve. He broke the back of the roll against his knee and began to read. He slighted nothing. He bored into the lump as a worm into a nut, seeking for a kernel. Meanwhile, David sat, marooned, trembling in the spray of so much literature. It roared in his ears. He held no chart or compass for voyaging in that sea. Half the world, he thought, must be writing books. Monsieur Bril bored to the last page of the poems. Then he took off his spectacles and wiped them with his handkerchief. "My old friend Papineau is well?" he asked. "In the best of health," said David. "How many sheep have you, Monsieur Mignot?" 309 when I counted them yesterday. The flock has had ill fortune. To that number it has decreased from 850. "You have a wife and home, and lived in comfort. The sheep brought you plenty. You went into the fields with them, and lived in the keen air, and ate the sweet bread of contentment. You had but to be vigilant and recline there upon nature's breast, listening to the whistle of the blackbirds in the grove. Am I right thus far?" "It was so," said David. "I have read all your verses," continued Monsieur Bril, his eyes wandering about his sea of books as if he conned the horizon for a sail. "Look yonder through that window, Monsieur Mignot. Tell me what you see in that tree." "I see a crow," said David, looking. "There is a bird," said Monsieur Bril, "that shall assist me where I am disposed to shirk a duty. You know that bird, Monsieur Mignot. He is the philosopher of the air. He is happy through submission to his lot. None so merry or full-crawed as he with his whimsical eye and rollicking step. The fields yield him what he desires. He never grieves that his plumage is not gay like the orioles. And you have heard, Monsieur Mignot, the notes that nature has given him? Is the nightingale any happier, do you think?" David rose to his feet. The crow cawed harshly from his tree. "I thank you, Monsieur Bril," he said slowly. "There was not, then, one nightingale among all those croaks?" "I could not have missed it," said Monsieur Bril with a sigh. "I read every word. Live your poetry, man. Do not try to write it any more." "I thank you," said David again. "And now I will be going back to my sheep." "If you would dine with me," said the man of books, "and overlook the smart of it, I will give you reasons at length." "No," said the poet, "I must be back in the fields, cawing at my sheep." Back along the road to Verneuil he trudged with his poems under his arm. When he reached his village he turned into the shop of one Ziegler, a Jew out of Armenia, who sold anything that came to his hand. "Friend," said David, "wolves from the forest harass my sheep on the hills. I must purchase firearms to protect them. What have you?" "A bad day this for me, friend Mignot," said Ziegler, spreading his hands, "for I perceive that I must sell you a weapon that will not fetch a tenth of its value. Only last week I bought from a peddler a wagon full of goods that he procured at a sale by a commissionaire of the crown. The sale was of the chateau and belongings of a great lord, I know not his title, who has been banished for conspiracy against the king. There are some choice firearms in the lot. This pistol, oh, a weapon fit for a prince. It shall be only 40 francs to you, friend Mignot, if I lose 10 by the sale. But perhaps an arquebus—" "This will do," said David, throwing the money on the counter. "Is it charged?" "I will charge it," said Ziegler, "and for 10 francs more add a store of powder and ball." David laid his pistol under his coat and walked to his cottage. Yvonne was not there. Of late she had taken to gadding much among the neighbors, but a fire was glowing in the kitchen stove. David opened the door of it and thrust his poems in upon the coals. As they blazed up they made a singing, harsh sound in the flue. "The song of the crow," said the poet. He went up to his attic room and closed the door. So quiet was the village that a score of people heard the roar of the great pistol. They flocked thither and up the stairs where the smoke, issuing, drew their notice. The men laid the body of the poet upon his bed, awkwardly arranging it to conceal the torn plumage of the poor black crow. The women chattered in a luxury of zealous pity. Some of them ran to tell Yvonne. Monsieur Papineau, whose nose had brought him there among the first, picked up the weapon and ran his eye over its silver mountings with a mingled air of connoisseurship and grief. "The arms," he explained aside to the curé, "and crest of Monseigneur the Marquis de Beaupertuis." End of Chapter 1, Part 2.